Lyonesse. Lyonnaise Lyonesse is a kingdom which, according to legend, consisted of a long strand of land stretching from Land's End at the southwestern tip of Cornwall, England, to what is now the Isles of Scilly in the Celtic Sea portion of the Atlantic Ocean. It was considered lost after being swallowed by the ocean in a single night. The people of Lyonesse allegedly lived in what is described as fair towns, with over 140 churches, and worked in fertile low-lying plains. Lyonnesse's most significant attraction was a castle-like cathedral that was presumably built on top of what is now the Seven Stones Reef between Land's End and the Isles of Scilly, some 18 miles west of Land's End and convert northeast of the Isles of Scilly. Lyonesse is mentioned in Arthurian legend, but particularly in the tragic love and lost story of Tristan and Iseult. Lyonesse is most notable as the home of the hero Tristan, one of the Knights of the Round Table, whose father Meliodas was king of Lyonesse. After the death of Meliodas, Tristan became the heir of Lyonesse, but he was never to take up his inheritance because Lyonesse sank beneath the sea while he was away at his uncle King Mark's court in Cornwall. In later traditions, Lyonesse is said to have sunk beneath the waves in a single night, yet stories differ whether this catastrophic event occurred on 11 November 1099 or 10 years earlier in 1089. According to legend, the people of Lyonesse allegedly had committed a crime so terrible that God took his revenge against them and their kingdom. The crime is never mentioned in any text or stories, but the legend tells of a horrific storm that occurred over the course of a single night, which resulted in an enormous wave that swallowed the kingdom and everything that was in its path. In what may have been a tsunami or tidal wave, the Kingdom of Lyonesse was lost forever and disappeared from the face of the earth as if it had never existed. The sole survivor. Local Cornwall village tourism guides offer stories of a man who escaped the storm and a subsequent wave while riding a white horse. Apparently, the horse lost one of its shoes during the escape. It is thought that the rider's name was Trevelyan or Trevelyan. The rider had been out hunting during the day and had fallen asleep under a tree. Trevelyan was awoken by a horrible noise and raced across the land to higher ground. This story is linked to local Cornwall families who have used the image of 3 horseshoes as part of their family crest for generations. One family in particular that goes by the name Vivian and are one of Cornwall's oldest families also has a crest of a white horse, and they also claim to be descendants of the sole survivor Trevelyan. The Vivian family claims that Trevelyan was the last governor of the Lost Kingdom before Lyonesse was swallowed by the ocean. Today, many myths and legends continue to rise to the surface about Lyonesse without physical evidence. Included among these legends are tales of local fishermen who claim that on calm days one can still hear the bells of the many churches softly ringing in the seas off the west Cornish coast. Local fishermen also claim that they have caught glass, forks, and wood in their fishing nets. The Lyonesse Project. A 2009-13 joint study titled The Lyonesse Project, a study of the coastal and marine environment of the Isles of Scilly, was commissioned by English Heritage and carried out by the Historic Environment Projects Cornwall Council with a team of academics, local experts and enthusiasts to reconstruct the evolution of the physical environment of the Isles of Scilly during the Holocene, the progressive occupation of this changing coastal landscape by early peoples and their response to marine inundation and changing marine resource availability. The project found that while much of the story of Lyonesse can be dismissed as fantasy, an overflow of legends and memories of submergences are common throughout the northwestern portion of Europe. It concluded that the Isles of Scilly were once a single large island which separated into smaller islands due to the rapid sea level rise. Stone walls have been located under the water in the vicinity of the Isles of Scilly, which supports the findings that sea level rises impacted the towns of the area, although it remains unclear whether there are evidence of buildings or the remains of medieval fish traps. Lyonesse in Arthurian legend. In medieval Arthurian legend, there are no references to the sinking of Lyonesse because the name originally referred to a still existing place. Lyonesse is an English alteration of French Lyonnaise or Lyonnois, a development of Ladonesia, the Latin name for Lothian in Scotland. Continental writers of Arthurian romances were often puzzled by the internal geography of Great Britain, thus it is that the author of the French prose Tristan appears to place Lyonnois beside Cornwall. In English adaptations of the French tales, Lyonnois, now Lyonesse, becomes a kingdom wholly distinct from Lothian and closely associated with the Cornish region, though its exact geographical location remained unspecified. The name was not attached to Cornish legends of lost coastal lands until the reign of Elizabeth I of England. However, the legendary lost land between Land's End and Scilly has a distinct Cornish name, Letherser. This derives from the Cornish name for the Seven Stones Reef, on the reputed site of the Lost Land's capital and the site of the notorious wreck of the. The name means the milky ones from the constant white water surrounding the reef. Alfred, Lord Tennyson's Arthurian epic Idylls of the King describes Lyonesse as the site of the final battle between King Arthur and Mordred, King Arthur's nephew and illegitimate son. One passage in particular references legends of Lyonesse and its rise from and subsequent return to the ocean. Then rose the king and moved his host by night and ever pushed Sir Mordred, league by league, back to the sunset bound of Lyonesse, a land of old up heaven from the abyss by fire, to sink into the abyss again, where fragments of forgotten peoples dwell, and the long mountains ended in a coast of ever-shifting sand, and far away the phantom circle of a moaning sea. Analogues in Celtic mythology. The legend of a sunken kingdom appears in both Cornish and Breton mythology. In Christian times it came to be viewed as a sort of Cornish Sodom and Gomorrah, an example of divine wrath provoked by unvirtuous living. There is a Breton parallel in the tale of the Cité d'Iseult wise, similarly drowned as a result of its debauchery, with a single virtuous survivor escaping on a horse, in this case King Gradlon. The Welsh equivalent to Lyonesse and Wise is Caer Gwaelod, a legendary drowned kingdom in Cardigan Bay. Not too dissimilarly, the Gaelic otherworld Tyrnot and Ogland of Ute was often conceived of as a mystical place that had to be reached via a sea voyage, though it lacks an inundation myth. It is often suggested that the tale of Lyonesse represents an extraordinary survival of fort memory of the flooding of the Isles of Scilly and Mounts Bay near Penzance when the sea levels rose during the Bronze Age. For example, the Cornish name of St. Michael's Mount is Carricklusian, whose literally the grey rock in the wood, suggesting that the bay was once a forest. According to local tourism guides in the region, Lyonesse was once connected to the west of Cornwall and is firmly rooted in Cornwall's traditions and mythology. Cornish people around Penzance still get occasional glimpses at extreme low water sunken forest in Mounts Bay, where petrified tree stumps become visible adjacent to the Celtic Sea. John of Worcester, a famous English monk and chronicler, wrote in 1099 that St. Michael's Mount, now an island in Mounts Bay, was 5 or 6 miles from the sea, enclosed in a thick wood. The importance of the maintenance of this memory can be seen in that it came to be associated with the legendary Brython hero Arthur, although the date of its inundation is actually c. 2500 BC. In fiction, Dawn in Lyonesse, a 1938 short novel by Mary Ellen Chase, the Lyonesse trilogy by Jack Vance Lyonesse, The World Between the Worlds 2009 and Lyonesse, Dark Solstice 2010, 2 children's books by Sam Llewellyn. The manga and anime series The Seven Deadly Sins is set in the Kingdom of Lyonesse. In the 1995 film First Night, before her marriage to King Arthur, Guinevere rules as Lady of Lyonesse. In poetry, Tristan of Lyonesse 1882, an epic poem by Algernon Charles Swinburne, When I Set Out for Lyonesse 1914 by Thomas Hardy. An edition published in 1932 adds the year 1870 to the title. Collected poems of Thomas Hardy, London, Macmillan and Company. 1932, 293-94 are reference to Hardy's trip to St. Juliot, where he met his first wife, Emma Gifford. The poem said Lyonesse is 100 miles away. The straight line distance from St. Juliot to Dorchester is 97 miles. Sunk Lyonesse 1922 by Walter de la Mare. Lyonesse 1962 by Sylvia Plath. Lyonesse 2021 by Penelope Shuttle. In music, Lyonesse, sung by Cornish folk composer Richard Gendall, appears as the title of the track of the 1982 album by Brenda Wooten, When I Set Out for Lyonesse, setting of Hardy's poem by the English composer Gerald Finzi in his 1936 song Cycle Earth and Air and Rain the Bells of Lyonesse, sung by German progressive metal band Subsidiary, appears on their 2018 album Lamwet. In transport, SS Lyonesse, a steam ferry of the West Cornwall Steamship Company. Lyonesse, Great Western Railway Bulldog Class Steam Locomotive No. 3361 Lyonesse, Southern Railway King Arthur Class Steam Locomotive No. 743 Lyonesse, British Railway Standard Class 5 Steam Locomotive No. 73113.